One of the best things you can do to support your franchisees effectively is to establish and run an excellent advisory council program. Most best-in-class franchisors that have good relationships have a very vibrant council system. Before you establish a council system, if you're a new franchisor, you should of course be looking for ways to get input and provide communication back and forth with your franchisees on a day-to-day basis. An advisory council simply formalizes that process and provides a structured method to provide back and forth feedback with your franchisees on an ongoing basis. A good council program will not only strengthen your relationship with franchisees, but it encourages them to provide feedback on strategic issues for the franchisor that will allow you to do a better job in developing your system. If you look at most of the major developments in the larger franchise system, breakfast at McDonald's, the Munchkins at Dunkin' Donuts, and other innovative developments in a lot of the larger franchise networks, a lot of those came from franchisees and the input of their regional councils. As you establish an advisory council program, there's essentially two ways to do that. Most councils are based on a small number of franchisees, perhaps 5 to 12, that are elected and serve in positions and meet with the franchisor perhaps anywhere between twice and 4 times per year. Those meetings should be run in a way that are very strategic and tactical, focusing on high-level issues of importance for both the franchisees and the franchisor. And what they really should not be is simply reporting meetings where the franchisor sends up each of their department heads one after another, reporting on what's going on in each department. Another way to set up an advisory council program, other than having a small single council that the franchisor meets with, is as you grow into a multi-regional system, is to set up a system of regional councils where each council comprises a group of franchisees from a specific region. And again, those meetings would be held at least twice a year, sometimes as often as 4 times a year. Before you formalize a council program, seek the input of your franchisees in terms of what they would like to see in the council. This allows you to make sure that when you roll out the council program and you communicate it to the franchisees, that they feel that they've had a part in creating it. It's also important that your council program be formalized through written bylaws which clearly state things such as when meetings will be held, who is on the council, what are the criteria to sit on the council, how elections will be held with the franchisees, and what the franchisor's role is in the council as well. In a well-run advisory council, the franchisees are not making decisions for you as the franchisor. They're simply there to provide input, and your advisory council bylaws should make sure that it reflects that point as well. The advisory council in many systems often expands into other councils or subcommittees. For example, a committee may be formed out of the advisory council that is specific to helping the franchisor make decisions as to how your marketing fund is going to be managed in your system. There could be other functions such as purchasing as well, or remodels in your system where franchisees have an input, and the council could again provide input either directly or through subcommittees that are formed. So a well-run advisory council is something that really promotes cooperation and communication within a franchise system, and it's something that the iFranchise group strongly believes in terms of a way to solidify your relationships with your franchise owners.
Okay. Establishing an advisory council, take 2, and action.
Creating an advisory council in a franchise system is one of the most important things that a franchisor can do to manage and maintain strong franchisee relationships in your program. There are basically 2 ways to set up a council. For most new franchisors, what they do is they set up a group of perhaps 8 to 12 franchisees that are elected by their peers, and the franchisor will meet with that group from perhaps 2 to 4 times per year. The agendas for those meetings are typically structured and developed by the council officers. A council may have, for example, a president, a vice president, and a secretary. So the agenda is set by the council with the input, of course, from the franchisor, with the purpose of the council being to provide feedback on strategic and tactical issues for the franchisor on an ongoing basis. A council program should not be designed, and the council meetings should not be run in a way where the franchisees are simply coming to expect input from the franchisor and reports from various department heads in the franchisor's office as to what's happening in the business. It should be much more strategic and tactical than that, as I mentioned. A good counsel program also encourages communications not only between the franchisor and the franchisee, but between franchisees themselves. I thought this one would be easy, but I think the problem is I'm kind of getting worried about this other meeting now, but try it one more time.
Okay. Establishing an advisory council, take 3, and action.
Establishing a franchisee advisory council is one of the most important things that a franchisor can do to solidify its relationships with its franchisees. A good franchisee advisory council program should be established early on in your development as a franchisor, even as early as when you have perhaps 10 to 15 franchisees in your system. As a new franchisor, probably the most effective way to develop a council program is to set up a group of maybe 8 to 12 franchisees who are elected by their peers in the system, who would meet with you between 2 and 4 times per year. At each council meeting, the agenda should be developed primarily with the leadership of the council. Typically, a council might have a president, a vice president, and a secretary, and they would work with the franchisor to set the agenda. Typically, several members from the franchisor's office would attend the council meeting, but the way the meeting should be run should not be in a format where the franchisor is simply there to provide reports as to what's happening in the business. A good council program should be run so that the meetings are much more tactical and strategic in nature, with the franchisees providing input on what's working well in their business, what they're struggling with, and what the franchisor can do to work with them more effectively. From time to time, you may also invite guests into the council meetings. You may have some vendors, some key suppliers, some industry experts on insurance, etc., to provide perspective as well. In terms of taking notes at a council meeting, we typically recommend that a franchisor provide somebody there to take notes and to develop the meeting minutes from that meeting. That alleviates the franchisees in attendance having to focus their efforts on writing down everything that was said. The notes ideally should be put into formal minutes, and those minutes should be distributed to all of the franchisees in your system. Before they go to the franchisees, of course, the council officers who are attending should review those to make sure that the meeting minutes accurately reflect the discussions that were held. Your council should also be governed by a set of written bylaws. Written bylaws are important because they clearly define the role of not only the franchisees, but the franchisor in the whole council process. The bylaws would address issues such as where meetings are held, how often meetings take place, who pays for the cost of the meetings, what types of discussions are to be held in the councils, what officers are elected, how often elections take place, what are the terms of the officers that are elected, and all of the other details in terms of operating the council on a day-to-day basis. As you grow from a regional to a multi-regional franchisor, one strategy to consider is to develop a system of regional councils. And that effectively is a situation where instead of having one small group of franchisees that you meet with on a regular basis, you would develop multiple regions, perhaps 2, 3, or 4, where each region would have its own council structure, and the structure of which would be very similar to what you had in the national program, where you might have in each region a president, a vice president, and a secretary. You would meet with the regional councils again between 2 and 4 times per year. Each of those regional council meetings would produce minutes, which are then distributed, we would recommend, not only to the franchisees in that region, but also to the franchisees throughout your system. Having a system of regional councils as a more mature franchisor allows you to discuss issues that are more pertinent to specific regions or DMAs within your network of franchisees. So having a vibrant council program is one of the things that will make you really appreciate the relationships that you have with your franchisees and communicate with them much more effectively and maintain your credibility as a franchisor.